Welcome, fight fans. It is time for another edition of the UFC on Fox franchise. Saturday, August 27th, UFC on Fox 21 takes place at the Rogers Arena in Vancouver, British Columbia. Welcome, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas. I'm a senior editor here at MMA Fighting, joined by the man on the other side of the screen, our young, intrepid writer and reporter, Danny Segura. Danny, welcome. How are you, my friend?
Thank you. I'm doing well.
All right, so let's preview this card. It's not one of the bigger, badder cards, but by no means a bad card. Now, Chuck Mindenhall from MMA Fighting and our creative duo, Esther and Casey, they're in Vancouver. And my sense of things, in hearing from them and other reporters as well, is that things are picking up in terms of buzz. They're late, but I don't know how to feel because UFC on Fox 20 didn't have a ton of buzz. They've been to Chicago a bunch, but in the end it did really great ratings. But did it do good ratings because we were just being too negative or because it was related to Holly Holm? My guess is the latter. Your sense of enthusiasm about this card heading into Saturday's big event?
I think it's not fully there yet. I think just because it also doesn't help that there's been huge cards left and right as of late for the UFC. So this card if you compare it to UFC 202, UFC 200, it's obviously going to look a lot worse. But if you really look at this card, it's not that bad. I think momentum will pick up as the weigh-ins kick in and other media coverage kicks in as well. But I think overall, I'm not extremely excited about this card, but by no means I think this is a bad card at all.
Rate your enthusiasm, scale of 1 to 10.
Maybe like 6.8.
That's higher than my 5. But nevertheless, I know what you mean. I don't think the prelim card is that great, but let's go ahead and talk about that main card.
Sure.
Start from the top down if we can. The main event, Carlos Condit taking on Demian Maia. It's interesting, this fight. It got a lot of buzz when it was announced, not merely because there's two really talented guys fighting in this welterweight division, but more than that, it represented the return of Carlos Condit. So before we talk about the matchup itself, I had him on my radio show, and he was like, yeah, I'm only going to come back for like Nick Diaz or St. Pierre or some kind of immediate title shot, something that was like directly related to either the title or like a massive big money fight, at least in his mind anyway. And this is not exactly those things. Demian Maia, a win over him, gets you, I guess, pretty close to the picture, but it's not a guarantee, I guess, as opposed to like an immediate rematch with Tyron Woodley or something. Your sense about Carlos Condit as he accepted this main event?
Sure. I think it's interesting. For me, if you beat Demian Maia, I mean, the guy is on a ridiculous streak. If you beat him, you have to fight for the title, right? But obviously, we know how the UFC works, and beating Demian Maia doesn't really get you anywhere just because he isn't a huge name. He doesn't have like a huge following behind him. So this is an interesting fight for Carlos Condit. It's a very dangerous fight for him too because Demian Maia has very good takedowns, and Carlos Condit doesn't have the best takedown defense out there. So I think this is a huge gamble for Carlos Condit. But, I mean, if he took this fight, it's for a reason. He thinks he can win it. And if he does win it, I think it puts him right there for perhaps, at least title contention.
It's not like Demian Maia hasn't been stopped with strikes, but a lot of good fighters who are good at striking haven't been able to do it. Matt Brown being one of them. Now, he's a different kind of striker than Carlos Condit, but when this fight was announced, I was like, wow, that is risky. Like, if you wanted to come out and get not a favorable matchup, but a guy who has a style that is relatively friendly to yours, this is not the one to get. And I would agree that if he wins, he should get at least a title shot or, vie for a number one contender spot or something like that. I just don't know exactly what's going to happen. And I think a lot of people are expecting fireworks in this one. There's only going to be fireworks if Condit gets his way. If not, it's just going to be a complete smothering. What sort of complexion of the fight are you anticipating?
Well, I think there could be fireworks as well on the ground. And I think Carlos Condit has very solid jiu-jitsu, and I think we can, witness some nice scrambles and a nice battle down there. I don't know if everyone will enjoy it. Obviously, a lot of people seem to be, like more the striking than the ground game. But I think it could be an exciting fight on the ground as well. Just the fact that Carlos Condit trying to get back up, and Demian Maia, trying to keep him down and trying to submit him. I think that itself could be interesting.
Official prediction.
I'm going to go with Demian Maia decision.
I will go with the same as well.
That's the way it's going to go down.
We move to the co-main event, a very interesting co-main event. Anthony Pettis, on a terrible losing streak, drops down to 145. We saw the photos and video that Esther and Casey put up yesterday. Geez, Anthony Pettis looks, I won't say frail, but he looks thin. What was your impressions when you saw how sunken in his face looked?
I didn't really get to see that many photos, but I did see the thumbnail of his scrum, and that was tiny. And I was like, whoa, is that Anthony Pettis or is that Sergio Pettis?
Right.
So this is pretty interesting. But I mean, I think this weight cut is a must. Him going up to welterweight obviously doesn't make any sense. And him staying at lightweight, you know, he needed to change something. So I think this cut to featherweight is a smart move by him. You know, I would have liked to see him, you know, I'm a huge fan of tune-up fights. I think there's a lot of tune-up fight matchups he could have gotten at featherweight. But, you know, he got Charles Oliveira, a guy who's ranked number 6. And, you know, it's a very tough test for him. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in tune-up fights as well. I would have liked to see him stay at lightweight and get some of those tune-up fights, you know, as he just dropped through the rankings, find a way to build back up. But for some reason, UFC doesn't really believe in them all that much. I mean, not in totality, but not a whole lot. I also agree a change was needed. I just don't know if this is the change, right? Something had to be different. I think we can agree there. Is this the something? I'm not saying it's not. Our colleague Ariel Helwani has some skepticism as well. I guess it's a wait-and-see approach. But to your point, I kind of like the fight. Charles Oliveira has gotten really good. He's still young as well. This one, for me, people are expecting fireworks in the main event. No. I think you're going to expect fireworks in the co-main event.
Yeah, this is a very exciting one. Charles Oliveira is ranked number 6, and he's 5-1. And let's keep it that in mind that one loss was a freak incident with Max Holloway where he injured his neck. You know, and he's a very game opponent. So we'll see what happens. But you know, I don't think this is the best matchup for Anthony Pettis. Again, I would like to see a tune-up fight just because, you know, even dropping to featherweight is something new, is something he has to get accustomed. And now he's fighting a beast like, you know, Oliveira. So I would like to see a tune-up fight. But, you know, still, I think it's a very competitive fight, and you know, it should be fireworks, as you said.
Official prediction.
I'm going to go with, I'm not liking that, you know, 0-3 for Anthony Pettis. And again, I really do think Charles Oliveira is a very game opponent. A lot of people are like sort of throughout that label of him as a prospect, but he's still young and he's still killing it. I really do believe he's a prospect in the featherweight division. I'm going to go with Oliveira.
Wow.
Probably decision. Yeah.
Going to be 0-4 for Anthony Pettis in his last 4, huh?
Yep.
I'm going to go with Pettis, but I think it's going to be very, very competitive. And to your point, like there's some statistical research to sort of suggest that if you're losing, a losing streak is more likely than getting back on the winning track, right? If you've dropped 2 in a row, it's more likely that you're going to drop 3. There is some research to believe that, but I think the change is going to bring Anthony Pettis back. But I think what's going to happen is he's not going to look good enough to be like, oh, this is a permanent home for him. Let's drop down to the feature bout of the night. This is interesting as well. Paige VanZant taking on Rowdy Bec Rawlings. Interestingly, I looked up the rankings before this. I don't know why I thought this, and again, these rankings they're made by donks, but
right.
Bec Rawlings isn't top 15 at all, and Paige VanZant, who has been inactive for 8 months now, is ranked in the top 10. Your impressions generally, first of all, of the time off for Paige VanZant. I actually think it's been pretty good for her. You know, she got kind of, not like badly beaten up by Rose Namajunas, but she got, you know, handled a little bit there. Took some time off, did some things that were refreshing for her soul, kept training, she's still in shape. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think time off is great for some fighters, and I think in this case, it was great for her. We saw what Felice Herring, the time off that, you know, how well it served her, and she did well. I think this time off has been well for VanZant as well.
Now, she's taken on Rowdy Bec Rawlings, who I had kind of counted out previously. She looked amazing, or at least, you know, pretty good in her last fight against Ham, who I call Search Engine Optimization Ham. That's not fair. That's not her name, but certainly her last name is Ham. She is an incredible talent. And I thought Ham was going to go in there and just be the cleaner, more technical boxer. In some ways, she was. But Rawlings has improved significantly, and she is kind of like VanZant in the sense of not wild and crazy, but she puts her foot on the gas offensively for large portions of the fight. What kind of fight are you expecting between these two?
I think this is going to be really gritty and really ugly. I think, you know, VanZant, you know, it's not wild again, but she tends to make fights pretty ugly. And Rawlings has the same style. She doesn't back down, and you know, full, she full foot on the pedal. And I think this is going to be just a back and forth. And I really do think this could be a fight of the night candidate. Obviously, there's some other great matchups here like Joe Lozon and Jim Miller, but I think, you know, this fight can surprise some people and be fight of the night.
All right, and then it moves us to the last fight on the main card. Remember, only 4 fights this time for the UFC on Fox shows. A rematch. Jim Miller taking on Joe Lauzon. An incredible rematch. First one was just an absolute bloodbath. Joe Lauzon, I have to say, I kind of counted him out against Diego Sanchez, and he looked really good. Strong, aggressive, had just a perfect sense of range and just beat the brakes off Diego quickly at UFC 200. And Jim Miller's kind of coming into this one, I won't say limping to the finish line, but it's just funny. Both guys have a lot of miles on their career, but I feel like Jim Miller is wearing it harder. Jim Miller's the black belt and the Division I wrestler, and I definitely favor Lauzon in this fight. What about you?
I would have to agree. I mean, my first thought when this fight got, announced, I thought, it was going to be some crazy fight of the night, back and forth battle as we saw in the first one. But that's what I thought when Joe Lauzon was matched up against Diego Sanchez, and the fight ended rather quickly. So, I think Lauzon has looked great, and I think there's a chance for him to finish this fight, in at least in a quick manner. As you said, Jim Miller, he's had some miles on his body, and he's still fighting, he's still competitive, but I think Lauzon it looks more like the fresher fighter. I think this fight's favoring him.
Real quickly, before we finish off on this main card, one last question about Paige VanZant. I almost forgot. The Dancing with the Stars thing, it's interesting. It definitely has made her more popular. People know about her. It's smart to put her on Fox. Is she a draw? Is she a star?
I think so. I was actually talking to a friend of mine. She has no idea about MMA. She might be able to name 2 or 3 athletes, if that. But one of them is Paige VanZant, because she saw her in Dancing with the Stars, and she watches all those shows. And I think for the casual fans, she is somewhat of a star. Maybe not as big as Ronda Rousey or Holly Holm, but I think she is a name, and someone that people recognize.
Before we go, any fight on the prelim card you've got your eye on?
Yes, I think Enrique Barzola versus Kyle Bochniak. I think that's a pretty good fight. For those who don't know Enrique Barzola, he is the winner of the Ultimate Fighter Latin America Season 2. And, I have a sort of a same feeling I had with Yair Rodriguez when he won that season. Enrique is one of the very few fighters from Latin America that's actually very well-rounded. He has very good boxing, hits very hard, and on top of that, he's got decent wrestling. I'm not saying he's going to be the next Yair Rodriguez and we're going to start seeing 360 kicks and all kinds of stuff, but I think he is a guy to keep an eye on, and a guy that's totally flying under the radar, especially for the American public. I think that's a guy that could surprise some people and have a very successful career in the UFC.
Fair enough. Now remember, this is one of the earlier cards with the Fox franchise, so the Fight Pass preliminary portion starts at 4:30. The Fox portion, I believe, still in the prelim card, starts at 6. Main card kicks off at 8. Should be done around 10 or 10:30 or so. For Danny, I am Luke. Keep it locked to MMAfighting.com. Chuck Mindenhall's coverage, as well as Esther Lynn and our buddy Casey, our videographer. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the fights.